6 young women held the fate of Rome in their hands, and their word could even stop an execution. They were the Vestal Virgins, the most mysterious, powerful priestesses of the Roman Empire. Chosen as children, they left their families behind forever. Once initiated, they lived 30 years within the house of the Vestals beside the Forum. Their lives were both privileged and perilous. The Vestals guarded Rome's sacred hearth, the eternal fire of Vesta. Romans believed that if this fire went out, the empire itself would fall. And so, night and day, they kept the flames alive. But their role wasn't only religious. The Vestal Virgins wielded real power. They could own property, leave wills, and ride in chariots, unthinkable freedoms for most women in Rome. On festival days, the entire city paused when the Vestals passed. Even the highest generals stepped aside. Every child in Rome learned the story. If someone fleeing a mob slipped under a Vestal's cloak, he was untouchable. The Vestal's presence was sacred, and her plea could pardon the condemned with a single word. Yet, their power had a cost. Each Vestal took a vow, 30 years of chastity. Any breach carried a terrifying penalty. If a Vestal was even suspected of breaking her vow, she faced trial before the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome. There was no jury, and rarely mercy. If found guilty, her fate was grim and public. She was led through silent streets as the people watched, veiled in white and buried alive in a chamber beneath the city, with nothing but a flickering lamp and a little food and water. The impure cannot be killed by the sword, Romans believed, so the earth itself became her tomb. But most Vestals became symbols of virtue and honor, and extraordinary influence. They sat in the front rows at gladiator games, and their blessing was sought for treaties, battles, and marriages among Rome's elite. When Clodius Pulcher once entered the house of the Vestals, disguised as a woman, trying to seduce Julius Caesar's wife, the scandal nearly toppled the political order, a sign of how the Vestals stood at the center of Roman trust and respect. One Vestal, Licinia, was so wealthy that the politician Crassus coveted her land. He accused her of breaking her vow, but she was acquitted when she proved her purity and innocence. The Vestals, after all, had a voice even against Rome's most powerful men. Their rituals were ancient, passed from generation to generation, gathering sacred water from the Aegean spring, preparing offerings in silence, baking the ritual mola salsa bread, and tending the flame using only a magnifying glass, the spark always drawn from the sun. Roman girls dreamed of being chosen Vestals. The selection was dramatic. Families offered their daughters, refusing was sacrilege. Only those with 2 living parents, no blemish, and perfect reputation could be chosen. It was a life of both sacrifice and immense honor. And on festival days, like the Vestalia, the gates of the goddess's shrine opened only once each year. The most honored matrons entered, barefoot to pray for their families and the empire. Outside, the people celebrated, knowing the fate of Rome itself rested in the Vestals' hands. Their privileges were legendary: exemption from their father's power, freedom from marriage, and even the right to own and dispose of property. For centuries, ambitious families saw the highest possible honor in giving a daughter to the cult of Vesta. Even emperors honored them. Augustus himself reformed their numbers and placed the eternal flame at the heart of his new Rome, signaling that as long as the Vestals watched over the fire, the empire would endure. Yet, being a Vestal meant never knowing a private life. Every move was watched, every gesture interpreted as an omen for Rome. Secrets, burdens, and huge expectations followed each woman. Some returned to society after their service, in rare cases marrying and raising families. but many remained in lifelong service, revered and sometimes feared. When disaster struck, suspicion often fell on the Vestals. After Rome was sacked by the Gauls, after military defeats, after periods of famine or plague, investigations would search for impurity among them, desperate for a reason why the gods might be angry. But even in peril, the Vestals showed courage. In 390 BCE, as the Gauls invaded, the Priestesses saved Rome's sacred objects, carrying them safely away before the city was captured. Over centuries, the house of the Vestals grew into a palace of white marble halls and lush gardens. Their statues lined the courtyard, each face preserved even after centuries. Their sanctuary hosted secret rituals. Few outsiders ever witnessed them, and what really took place is still lost to history. When the old gods fell out of favor, so did the Vestals. In 394 CE, the last flame was extinguished by order of Emperor Theodosius, the end of an era lasting over 1,000 years. The women who had once been Rome's most powerful figures faded into memory. And yet, the legend of the Vestal Virgins endures. They remind us how, even at the center of an empire ruled by men, a handful of women could command awe, fear, and ultimate respect. Who would you trust with the fate of a civilization? In Rome, the answer was always the Vestals. What secrets did they keep, hidden behind white veils and marble walls? And what truly happened in their temple when the city slept? Maybe history will never tell, but their eternal flame still burns in the imagination of a world that remembers them and wonders what power we have yet forgotten. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned. The next story reveals secrets whispered only among the streets of ancient Rome.